Welcome, everybody. October 11th, back for another Node Operator Roundtable, and I will hand it straight over to Brian to go over the agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. So today we have a few topics we're going to cover, starting with a quick update on the 5.0 release, and then going into a discussion on testing and sort of quality assurance for releases, basically seeking input on how to improve processes there. And then finally, I'd like to ask some questions about the upgrade processes that node operators and BPs sort of follow when new releases are available. So with that, on 5.0, we had last week, we had an RC1 available for a matter of minutes, basically, before it was realized that there was an issue. So we actually pulled down that release. That has since been fixed, and we have a call later today to do a kind of go no go on releasing RC2, which will actually be, the first release candidate. Like, we're treating it as the first release candidate for 5.0. So hopefully today, and if you're watching this on a pre-recorded video, then in the past, and if not today, I'll give an update soon on when that can be available. But I think overall things are looking good for that. Eric, is there anything you want to add on this topic before we move to testing?
No, unless people have questions on the issue or what it was, if we want more details.
Yep, sure. We'll leave some dead air in case people have questions.
I'm jealous you guys got your cups of whatever warm beverage. I get up, roll out of bed, and straight onto this meeting. I know. I can't do it right when I wake up. I need like an hour.
I've been awake for a really long time.
Yeah,
I've got a 4-year-old.
That's what I was about to say. I start off, I got kids I got to get to school.
Yeah, I'm in a different time zone, so.
True. He is like 3 hours before us. I'd still be awake though, but I probably wouldn't be drinking anything at your time. You're right.
I sympathize with Ross though. I finally had some meetings at 9 p.m. and he's all chipper and hanging out, and I'm like, I got nothing.
My 6-year-old has taken an interest in Godzilla, and so he's always begging me to like look at like Godzilla graphic novels and stuff with him, but invariably it gives him nightmares and he wakes me up in the middle of the night.
You're not the only one that struggles with that,
Yeah.
logic dilemma. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Yeah, 5.0. It sounds like nobody has any questions on the issue there. So look out for the RC2, which will be again the first release candidate for 5.0.
So it will be called it'll be tagged as RC2.
It will, yes. Mm-hmm. All right. Now moving on to testing. Eric, would you mind kicking off this topic?
Yeah, we did things a little bit differently this time, and I think some good stuff came out of it. And I wanted to make a specific proposal. So I'll give a little bit of a lead in. Well, I wouldn't say super specific, but more specific proposal. This time we tagged, as we were in development, some code and gave instructions on how to build it so that we could create an early access release of an API node we could test out, specifically for read-only threads. And there's some good stuff that came out of this. We got bugs for logging. We looked into some potential performance issues on the read-only threads because we weren't getting the results that we thought we should. We fixed some of that stuff. And I thought that was good, but also I thought I think the tag is a little bit hard to get to. And so for you guys here as block producers, if we were to have like points in our development in the coming year where we put out things to say, hey, this is at a state that you could try it out and test it. Here's the things you might want to look for. Would you prefer to have it as code with instructions that you built? Or would it be better off to have like a development Debian package that you could consume? And then if you did get it, even basic tests are okay. Like if you're able to set it up and run it with your config file. Like for example, this year, I was testing out, going back and forth between Leap 4 and 5, testing some stuff out. And I found in Leap 5, one of the configs that I could put in the config file, I couldn't do that in Leap 4. And it blew up, it stopped, it wouldn't even work. So, I think even simple testing is good too. But the question is, would you guys be willing to even, kick the tires a little bit? And if so, what would be the best format to deliver that development milestone in?
I'll leave it.
I don't think it would matter for most if you have one or the other available, because it's not a big deal. Like for example, if it saves you a lot of time from making releases or Debian packages, then the code with instructions is good enough. Although in an ideal world, we'll have something like NVM for Node.js, where you can just be like NVM use RC2 and kind of like just experiment with it. It'll just be easier on that same testing environment to go between ones, especially if you're looking for differences from certain versions or things that used to work but don't.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I guess from my side, you need to categorize what type of feature you're being testing might help. Like if it's using an API, or how does it work for you as like a developer, like Shaq, who's more building awesomeness on top of it, providing your own environment and being able to manage it, not have to deal with, hey, look, here's a test network for you to be able to play with, to do what you do, and tell me if it responds like, are the responses right? Is it deserialized when it should be serialized? Whatever, right? But to maintain that for you guys. But if you're looking for like node operators, that we're not a Docker shop, so like we're looking for either source code or a binary. Not even so much, we'll take, deb files or whatever that are precompiled. Most of us are looking, I'm gonna say, I think I know Matthew, you may even be putting your own plugins and modifications into it. And if you really want to test what it's like in the real world as node operators, that's like you saw with RC1. You let Matthew get a hold of it, and all of a sudden, wasn't nearly what you thought it was, right? It's just, but is that needed for a lot of the things, like your performance or fixes about it cutting off and truncating, or can we now paginate more than 100 results at one time? Much easier for you to just say, hey guys, here's a chain and accounts or whatever, and just kind of provide it as almost a stable testing ground for your latest features that don't require us to go through any of the deployment. We tend to deploy like on Jungle, like when BPs are ready to take shit and rip it out there and start letting people play. In my mind, that's just taking it and rolling a release out to Jungle and then starting to, because anything beyond that is just a little dev test environment stage net, right? So anyway,
I think that makes sense if you, especially if you have features that are going to be activated and you need to test those, then ideally you do have a test net that is meant for testing that or has those additional features activated. But for most of the stuff, if you're mainly testing almost like backwards compatibility, where you want to run the new Leap version and just want to make sure that existing infrastructure and stuff like that, you actually don't want another testnet. You want to run it against your own stuff and make sure it results in what you expect.
And that may be even as much as raw code to compile your own binary. Maybe not as much, because a lot of Matthew's magic, I think, is getting baked in, but at least deb files or binaries, because then we can start dropping them out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like the core features that we developed, the testing is pretty good. When I look back at bugs since the move to the Antelope repository, what I was seeing is more the regressions, right? So things that we didn't test as well. So ship logging or Prometheus
Well, and that's
logging.
what I was gonna say. Like, I tend to pick up on ship things because we're a huge ship shop with Hyperion on a bunch of different networks, and it's typically you're never gonna find that until number one, you roll out to like a jungle or a Kylan or even some of the test nets, but really even the main nets, and it's not a lot of us have the ability. I have multiple nodes, right? So I can take one of the backups and say, all right, let's try out this new version, but not be fully live on it, but still be ripping EOS mainnet into Hyperion or something, right? Or even when I break shit and do replays and find out, hey, by the way, it's broken block 10 million. But you really are going to have to roll it through the infrastructure. But
And I think with certain versions, like it's very important, I think you mentioned this, Eric, but like to highlight what is changed and some of the potential things that could be affected by it, which is really what you're also testing for, right? Like, okay, we changed these things that could have an effect on ship. It could have an effect on DeepMind, although, obviously you guys did your own testing, but these are the other areas where in maybe a list of priorities, even of like what we would like tested with this new version that might have an impact beyond what we discovered. And then say ship is one of them. Somebody like Michael might be like, okay, I'm going to take that task. And versus having this kind of like open, just test everything in a kind of like a big, really, source code, it's a bit unrealistic to find, somebody outside like a group concentrated on that to actually work on it. But to test specific parts, I think that would be an easier way to distribute some of that testing in a way that somebody feels they could take it on and provide value versus more vague help.
there's also two sides to it: deploying it, managing it, dealing with it, and then actually testing it, right? I'm much heavier on the throw it out there, get it going, let you know how it broke to get there. But I mean, other than ripping my own scripts and just coming up with some ideas of abuse, I rely on the public infrastructure to be the tester sometimes, which is jungle and the test nets and stuff. So there's really two sides to it. One's obviously much easier than the other. I'm always rolling updates, I'm always multiple nodes, but dedicating effort to actually testing the experience or how the APIs respond, that's another level. Can be done. It's just would take a different effort.
But it seems like it'd be interesting then if we had a demonstrable new feature set, right? That was maybe before the upgrade. We could release some development milestone and provide specific instructions on how to build it and how we actually tested for it so that people could also see the same thing, right? If we did that, that might be interesting to folks. But otherwise, it seems like everybody has their own special way of doing it, and they prefer to go through a different process of letting it soak in jungle first before they even picked it up to take a look at it. Because you guys are all busy. Understand you have lots of different things that are competing for your time. For us to just throw out stuff and ask you to like test ship logging for this, it's probably not. It's probably not going to happen. So I just want something that's going to work.
It's going to be more
Both of us.
effective. Yeah, I mean, there are people that use jungle like a production network, so there's transactions flowing through it. It's much more designed in, and it's intentionally pitched as, nah, man, shit's going to be broken all over the place. We're running bleeding edge. We want you to break and fall on your face, because then we fix it and then roll it to Kylan where it's much more stable. That's where you should do your dev. But that's at least how we feel. And of course, managing so many different jungle and then test nets and then even main nets, maybe not even public facing, much easier for us to do and more real world results, right?
So Matthew and I were having a side conversation in the chat that for the sake of posterity, I want to kind of summarize here on the call as well. So basically, he made the statement that he wouldn't use compiled binaries, and they always build from source. I asked some sort of follow-up whys on that. And the reason there was that security updates come as patches, which means that you've got to build from source in that scenario. So basically the comment was, if ever it is required to build from source, then at least for some, it's better to sort of build your processes and automate around that thing that you might sometimes have to do, rather than installing compiled binaries or packages. Yeah, the takeaway there is that if we wanted packages or binaries to be the sort of de facto way that everybody does an upgrade, then it would need to be kind of like ubiquitously available for any release. And there would still be some, I imagine, where they would choose to build from source because they have some kind of customization, right?
But keep in mind, sometimes the security updates come in patches because they're not public, where you're not necessarily releasing a release to the public by the time the producers had to apply that patch.
Right.
And I guess I asked a question. I thought originally it was in relation to the publishing of these hotfix milestones, right? Is going through the subtle efforts that it takes to get these pre 5.0 releases, right? And lessons learned from that, which I don't think is as encompassing of the why you asked, why do we build from source? You need to be able to build from source. I don't know if that, in context of that conversation, is as much about related to the pre-5 release. I mean, we have our processes and whatnot, but it is definitely important to be able to test, to be able to build from source in general. And you also have to keep in mind that we have custom binaries on some pretty major chains. So like we have to take those diff files and actually apply them to the custom builds over there, which sometimes is where the symptom we're trying to fix is, right? So the building from source is very important, definitely related to security updates. I don't know if, in my opinion, I mean, I don't want to speak for Matthew, but if you just scope it in relation to the pre-5.0 releases, it depends on what you're looking to test. If you wanted to get tested on wax, you can't give us binaries, right? We have to have code or diffs or something to be able to port over. So it really depends on where you're trying to go with it. But in relation to the whole why BP should build from source, that's a different thing. And I agree with them.
I am curious there, and maybe I'll write down my question in case Eric has more on this topic of testing, because it's starting to blur into my upgrade line of questioning. So I'll pause. Eric, did you have other sort of lines of questioning you wanted to go down on this?
No, I got good input. I think the early, my takeaway is the early API test was a good one. And then next time if we're going to do that again, we should be even sharper on this specific thing that's new and different in this release, and how you would test it and use it, right? Or how we would. And I think that would be a development, right? Not any of the existing nomenclature used for our release status, but I think that might be useful. And as Instant Finale goes forward next year, I think we'll have some of those milestones. So we'll see. But definitely very few, very specific.
And just to add to that, like something you said, Eric, earlier, about like, I understand the nature of the relationship between the BPs and, say the ENF, and you can't just like ask them to, like take on certain tasks. My point was not that you take ship and create as a task that's like a mandate for someone to do. It's more like kind of divide the potential testing needed into categories that anybody could choose to obviously take on, not be like assigned it, for example, like by force.
Yeah, I think again, I think that goes back to being specific. So like if something changes in a block extension that might impact Block Explorer, then we might have some specific tasks that a Block Explorer could set up and run. And then we might also go back to GrayMass and Wharf Kit and say, hey, these things might, make sure that they work for how you do topos or something like that. So I think, yeah, I agree with you on that stuff. They don't come up that often though, because we really do strive to be backwards compatible, and we have a number of continuous integration tests that are in place that are actually testing those things.
And I do think Wharf will be like I've been kind of close to it, and I do think that like shifting the changes needed into Wharf directly, and that being like the basis, replacement for EOS and everything else, like the basis for most front end, back end, as well as tools that people build on top of it. So I think it'll be easier for developers, for operators, for everybody involved if everybody starts using something like Wharf versus like kind of custom solutions people were having. Will unify that experience and allow the changes to be concentrated in Wharf, and that's supported, and then the tools can just consume that new data from Wharf.
So Wharf is a good example of what you're talking about here. I'm just curious, does that abstract to other things? Are there other examples of that split? Or is it really just specifically Wharf?
Well, I think now Wharf is, it's a bunch of things together, right? Like they have the Antelope library, former EOS.io library, that is, like you can do all the core stuff. But now they have, like everything with the UI, the integration with different wallets. So kind of like replacing UAL, and you can also use it on the back end. It supports like, private key as a wallet. So it's very flexible. And of course, the contract kit and all that other fun stuff for developers. But really as like really supporting it at the Antelope library level, which automatically Wharf will, utilize for any changes. I think that's like, being in sync with them, so to speak. I think that will really help mainly developers to make sure that they can stay on the latest versions without having to dig deep into the changes they need to do, which have to do with lower level access in a way.
Yeah, I think another area that's maybe a little bit more murky, but might fit into the same kind of category is sort of API layers, Hyperion or Firehose / substreams, those sorts of things.
I mean,
one depends on DeepMind, and one depends on ship.
Yeah, I mean, the whole ship layer is almost this whole, Hyperion, Atomic, Chronicle, because I think that Stan just ran into something with 404 where ship changed how it reported whatever the head block is, and now he's needing that fixed. So it's the unknown unknowns, right? That's really where once you start rolling it out beyond a scoped testing environment. Here, build this, run this, test this. How does the rest of the shit work? Well, you need all the rest of the trash to go with it. You know what I mean?
But like if you have the core stuff, like say any ship changes are kind of announced and highlighted very clearly on how it could affect something like Hyperion or Chronicle or somebody who communicates directly through WebSocket
if it's known,
to ship.
absolutely if it's known. But I can tell you the 2 or 3 that I ran into once I finally started replaying EOS on a state history node, they got broke somewhere down the line a long time ago, and nobody ever picked up on it because we never did it. And I was finally the first one that went back through that process and went, ah, shit, that doesn't work anymore. Doesn't work in the old version either, huh?
Right, but to support history solutions, it's really, I think you only have DeepMind and Chip as part of, like, say, the plugins that
Trace.
will.
I think GraveMass is very big on
Right.
Trace, and then of course exchanges tend to use Trace. But those are, I think, are the three main.
They use their own custom robo that's like utilizes Trace for
Correct.
sure and adds more to it.
Correct. But
Maybe part of the challenge there is that there's very few parties that have exposure across the entire spectrum of, like front end stuff, like Wharf or its predecessors, API stuff with, all of the things that were just listed, right? And running nodes, like at a sort of block producer level. So I think that's part of the issue as far as, like, to Michael's point, like if it's known, right? There's some of these things, full end to end, doesn't really happen until it's in the hands of a wide audience, right?
But it could be
Almost a secondary
mitigated
stage.
by having, for example, if there is, ship changes,
Right.
that there could be an.
We lost Shaq.
he's been censored.
Yep.
He was
That's how you
he was
mitigate
speaking
it.
blasphemy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mitigate
you
it
just talk.
there.
You just stop.
Actual
Wow.
direct relay, like kind of at least the main thing that Wharf or the Antelope chain communicates with.
Oh, there it goes.
I
think it finally
I got
caught it.
disconnected.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, we missed most of that.
But yeah, like the idea is just to have that information of the changes relate to the parties, and there's not that many parties, right? There's like, Chronicle, Hyperion, and maybe Matthew and Pink Network for the DeepMind integration. And once you just have, and Wharf for anything like Antelope API changes and what have you, then at least you make sure that people that are updating these tools, that the tools will work with the new releases. And most everybody else is just consumers of these tools. So they like most of the time, the communication or your code is still gonna work with whatever changes. Maybe you have now like an option to add send transaction 2 as a flag, right? But you don't need to use it. And it's gonna be like, these tools will make sure that it's a consistent experience for the user and they're not forced to, change their code right away, so to speak.
Is there something taking it to the early testing example that we did this time around? Is there something we could have done differently or better there? Because in a sense, that is kind of what we did by referring to it as an API test release, right? Maybe we could have been more explicit or something somehow around that about like, yeah, this could have impacts to, API nodes.
I think we did okay there. I mean, the biggest thing on that upgrade path was you had to do a snapshot because the chain-based version differed, and and you had to restore from that snapshot. And I think that was a success because I think people got that message, even if they didn't try it out. At least they now understood that that was a part of this upgrade cycle. And then the specifics on that early access was really trying to test out the read-only API, going above the standard like 4 threads, and that was good, at least for us on our side, to get some feedback of, okay, well, you need guidance on how you're supposed to configure these threads, like how many make sense. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd agree. I mean, I didn't get a chance because I was tied up with a bunch of other dumpster fires, but other than, the original, any of you just started with a bullet point list of major topics, and then it started kind of filling in. And yeah, if the build process was a little different than what we're used to, notes on that. And, I mean, I think the whole thing was downloading, you had to download and compile Wharf and try to smash certain things. And I was like, whoa, as a node operator, I can answer it, but, so the additional details that you did find, fill out, and well, this is what the people that got access were really maybe looking for additionally. That was, well done. Yeah, I agree. I think that it was scoped pretty well. At least I understood it. Read-only threads. Again, you got to wrap your head around what are those read-only threads, that list of what category is. But like I say, that's testing is, does it work? What do you see as any results? Scoped, targeted. I look at that as phase one. Phase two would be, okay, we feel pretty comfortable. It seems backwards compatible from the people that have done this phase one, like a Shack who knows what the hell it should be doing, what it doesn't, looks a little different. Then say, hey guys, why don't y'all rolling this out to what you feel comfortable deploying it to? Be it Jungle, which every node on Jungle is fair game, be it some backup nodes, things like that, be it a public node. Like if you were testing public API, I would have loved to put that version in front of, you see my stats. I mean, 120 million get blocks a week or something, right? I mean, it's crazy stats, but didn't really feel comfortable because we were still kind of in, and we didn't have time. I know we were kind of quick lighting it, but that's what I kind of say is, what are you looking to test? Are you looking to test the knowns?
Right.
Or is it the rest of the unknown unknowns? Because that's really where all the ancillary, that's where I have ship feeds. That's where you've got trash going in all over the place. That's where I'm going to go try to run a replay on a 3.5 terabyte block log and corrupt state history logs doing it. Anyway, but 2 different levels.
But my point is, if you like really,
Right.
if you just have, like, if you're in sync with, say, just Hyperion and Wharf, for example, and then as soon as you have something that changes ship, there's a new Hyperion update. It's much easier for people to just run that new updated Hyperion. And even if that comes with an required extra API that, required extra like node that you maybe guys run or Hyperion team runs to be able to test these new features. Same with Wharf. They have a node, for example, that runs with those latest features, and Wharf has a beta version that you can use to test all those latest features. It's much easier for people like me to just test that. Like I just go into the dApps we have, run a local version, and put that new version that makes use of free transactions, for example, and try to change some of my stuff locally, focus on what I'm working on while being able to test these new features versus having to dedicate time solely to test out things that range quite a bit in terms of scope.
And did they not? Because they provided the Wharf kit. I guess I had the assumption that that was available to try to test whatever was being tested, right? I mean, it may not have been new API features and stuff like that, but was that not what the Wharf kit, that wasn't helpful to you?
No, we use WorkKit and update it regularly, but we've also been using like read-only transactions in terms of return values and all these things because they've been available. I'm actually not fully aware of the latest, what was meant to be tested in the latest, so I can't really comment on that. But I'm saying as a general strategy, if whatever is released is in sync with the main components that people actually talk to the network with or index the network with, it's just much easier for these people to do the testing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Everything that we do is compatible, and so we ship decoupled, right? Now, if there was something that we couldn't decouple for some reason, we would really get ahead of that and ask those folks that would use, our blockchain to code it up now so that it would work both with the old and the new version of things. But for read-only threads, for example, that a whole change that went in, there wasn't any change to the API. There wasn't any change to the way it worked. It was more, we think you should get better performance, but you're going to have to configure it to get that performance.
And do this, this, and this as an example, and you should see it. And that's what, I mean, I'd also say trying to get the layer 2 support to keep up with pre-releases and release a release along with it, I would probably say that's when they get notified and they get a copy of it to start playing with it and try to, I would assume, at least coordinate with the RC, right? And that way you can at least kind of go in step, because otherwise
and due to the nature, And due to the nature of the relationship between these different parties involved, is if you were to, coordinate with the, Hyperion and Wharf and what have you, I would suspect that you'd also want to have some type of, this is more ENF internal, but I would suspect you want to have some type of ongoing agreement with them where it's actually kind of like some of their mandate is to continue supporting the different RC versions and to act on it as soon as it's available. But obviously that's a deal to be made versus like a request from the community,
There are certain people that are probably key stakeholders for certain services, I'd say, right? The Nations is a diffuse shop, Igor and Rio is Hyperion. I'd say Stan, for Chronicle, Pink or Wombat, I guess now for Atomic. So there are definitely some key layer 2 solutions that it would be good to have, obviously mainstream connections with, but I do keep those kind of different than what I think y'all are kind of talking about. We've given them, they're working on their stuff, but you guys really try to light it on fire. Let's see if you can EOS USA it or not. And like I said, that's okay.
Yeah, again, anytime we're delivering software, we purposely trying to make sure that compatibility exists, and we're testing for it as well. So it'd be very, very rare if there was an exception that we had to make some radical departure or change. And if we do have to make some sort of change, usually we wrap it right with a protocol upgrade, right? So
Yeah.
But I mean, think about this, like Hyperion normally sits an API in front of everything. They do pass through for all the native API clients, right? So you can query a Hyperion node and it just goes through to a client RPC API on the back end. But it's hard-coded paths that go between there. And we've already run into issues along the years where if it's not configured as a pass-through path, it doesn't make it through. So if Hyperion doesn't know push transaction 2 or whatever, right? Or some of these new paths, or even now we're splitting things up and trying to slice and dice, being in tune with that, even if it's not like a ship indexing feeder, just having communication with some of those mainstream IBC. I mean, I definitely think that might be something that keeping in touch with how that native Antelope IBC solution works with all the features, Anyway, I run them all, so except for diffuse. Man, that's so hard.
My favorite is diffuse, but unfortunately it's lost its support and might continue in the form of firehose and substreams. Although there were so many features missed from that, just like their GraphQL queries, within minutes, you build your whole database of anything you wanted. It was quite nice without going through every block as in firehose.
Matthew and substreams now, right? Anyway,
That would
I
be
digress.
an interesting deep dive sometime, is the sort of the state of firehose and substreams and what can be done with it, like for this audience. I mean, would be an interesting deep dive. Okay, so on upgrades, I did paste some questions into the chat. I just wanted to kind of do some information seeking here. So this is an open question for the node operator folks on the call. Like, what is it that triggered your last update across all, or at least most of your nodes? By update, I mean like a upgrade to a new version.
New
Well,
feature.
for us, it's
Go ahead, Chuck.
Okay, I'll just say quickly. For us, it was when we wanted to use read-only transaction, when we wanted to use like the return values and make use of the new, basically like threading ability and read-only transaction performance improvements. We had to, in our case, we made a new testnet, a private testnet, to use these new binaries, because obviously on EOS Network, it's like it's more of a coordinated upgrade. So that was why we needed to do it, and we coordinated, of course, to upgrade our mainnet as well to the latest release. But mainly for us, what would drive us is a feature we need. Like, and I would assume it's similar to other people. That feature could just be improvements in performance, so you reduce your, scaling costs, for example, or a specific feature needed that is only available in the new version.
Thanks. Yeah. Michael, it sounded like you were gonna jump in.
Did. I had to step away for a sec. I thought somebody else would fill in, but
Yeah.
I would say one other interesting spin on that question might be, why did you not upgrade until,
That was
right?
coming up.
So look at it a different, I mean, it's because that's, don't fix what ain't broke. But it was new features. It was the new API endpoints. People noticed that we didn't have, transaction status or retry or whatever. It was the BP or peer-to-peer enhancements. Obviously, going from 3 to 4, there was some of it. What we've been talking about on these calls for the last 2 years, a lot of those finally were coming to some fruition. And 4 was what they got rolled into. It took till 404 until and why did we wait so long to go to 404? Was because SHIP was known to have a lot of issues, some issues, detrimental. And that obviously got us scared. So we stayed on 3.1.0 for a long time on a lot of nodes to keep things working. Or I upgraded some other nodes with Kevin, right? If I tell Kevin I broke something, he's like, "Oh, this is one version behind. You should be in the latest version." I already fixed that. But myself and Matthew and probably Shaq, we tend to run a little more bleeding edge,
So
trying to address issues.
that was the concerns about SHIP. What version were you on, and what version were you avoiding upgrading to? Just for.
So I stuck on 3.1.0,
Okay.
which I think I went to 3.1.4 because I had to for like a critical patch, if I remember right. But 3.2 had some changes to SHIP, like the format or something like that, and had some known bugs or some things to get worked out. And then 4.0, and then it took till 4.04, I think. And even still, Stan says there's an issue with the way something reports in SHIP, but we haven't really noticed it. But that's what I had stayed pretty far behind on primary nodes, right? I mean, mission critical. We had started shifting over and running 4.0, on some backup nodes and testing it out, but very quickly, we realized, ooh, those are some problems that the farther I push it, the more detrimental it is to me and my stack. Like I say, API, SHIP, ooh.
Any other input on this one about what
And the
triggered
main
your last
reason-
upgrade that prevented? Yeah.
And I'll just add, there's another main reason to upgrade, which is like you don't want to be forked out of the chain. So when there's a needed upgrade, you do that.
Which is going to be the last wave. These exchanges, right? They're on 3.0 right now, probably 3.1, nice stable release. And until we push a 5.0 consensus fork, probably going to stay on 3.1 because everything works.
All right. Last question in this vein is how similar or different are your upgrade processes when you're doing a large upgrade, meaning across multiple node endpoints and whatnot? How similar or different are your processes for various Antelope networks? Like, is it all pretty much the same, or are there significant differences in how you need to roll those out?
I guess nobody's jumping in. I'd say for the most part, 95% is all the same, right? It's all core, Node OS, whatever. Other networks have other dependencies that may need to be considered, right? Other layer 2, even layer 3. So there is that sometimes is a special consideration. obviously a big difference for 3, 4, 5, I don't know, is the custom binaries, right? Is that it's easy for me to upgrade like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of my network because they're all vanilla Node OS. But FIO, Ultra, Wax, UX, I mean, they have these custom builds that need to be ported over, handled a little differently. It's not quite as seamless. I got to do another build, right? And of course, we build one binary and tend to ship it all around, right? I don't do devs or whatever. I just that way I can run them all.
Yeah. Is there a theme to what those customizations include, or why they're required?
Which customizations? The extra steps
that require custom binaries on those networks. I'm saying.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, those are going to be, and I think Matthew even mentioned and has like a hot fix to it, that why does Wax have custom builds? They took the vanilla Antelope, needed an extra feature, I think RNG and maybe some other things, and had to do it at the binary level. Same thing with FIO, same thing with Ultra. They've taken the vanilla code and Ultra UX, they've done their own. And so, look, anything that's great. They try to keep them based, but I can tell you, I mean, there are still some networks that have just finally shifted from 2 to 3.
Right.
Nope, I still got one network that's on the 2 protocol.
We just shifted from 2 to 4.
Correct. UX went 2 to 4. Ultra's going forward, and FIO is actually still, I think, on a 2.0 protocol, but they're looking at rolling something in. But we're progressing so fast over here. That's what I was saying, man. We're still waiting on 4.0 to really even find its way out through the full ecosystem. And here comes 5 on top of it. So you're going to go 3 to 5.
Yep. So
but Matthew talked about there are certain features, and how you do that is beyond my coding ability, but they have custom code that only they use, and apparently it changes something.
Right. Do you know if those extra features share anything in common, or are they kind of just?
I mean, you'd have to talk to the devs. Some of them I don't even I couldn't even tell you the source code. They don't even open it to us. They just give us binaries. But I mean, it's some of the main teams and talk to, but I'd say they're all over the place. You've got UX, which obviously is bleeding edge on their features. FIO did a whole lot of custom things, with their APIs and the way things work. Ultra, they kind of hot rodded a few things that they do. And then Wax, I think it's RNG, and is there maybe some kind of VCC that was built into them early on? I don't remember what exactly, but
for us, it's just a few changes, like mainly the resource model, an ability to freeze contracts and a few other things here and there. But yeah, in general, now we want to stay up to date with latest versions. So like before we didn't, and now that we're building maybe like demanding applications that would benefit from all the new features, I would say that's our biggest driving or like reasoning to push to be on the latest and keep upgrading, is because we want to make sure that any dApps released on the chain are able to scale as they need, basically.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for your input there. I appreciate the info and education. We are at 10 o'clock. So I will hand it back to Daniel to close us out.
Hit me up on that other question. I'll give you some more answers on it. We can chat offline.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brian. Again, I'll be off next week, but I'll make sure Brian's got the keys to keep the show rolling. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Good day, everybody.